Hello. For this week's video summary, I have chosen a biology textbook as my problematic text. Um, in fact, it is the Campbell book, show it, Essential Biology, if you guys have read that. And I actually used it for a college course, but I think it's appropriate for a high school course as well. Seems like the right level of in-depth and everything, in-depthness. So I also chose this because I felt like a textbook is something my students will be coming in contact with fairly often in high school, and then even more often when they move on to college. That's like the main thing that you learn from in college. So having those comprehension strategies, having that toolbox to use when interacting with difficult texts would be super useful. And it's actually something that I feel like I didn't really get the education for, so I'm really thankful for this class and all of these strategies that are really helpful. So why is a textbook problematic? We learned a little bit about that last week. Historically, children struggle with textbooks, yet it continues to be the main instructional material a lot of times. They can also be, boring, dull, non-interactive. I think just generally there's an association with being no fun. There are hundreds of new vocabulary words thrown in just a few chapters. Textbook authors are constantly filling up the pages with as much content as possible because they have to, right? So the particular passage I've chosen is problematic for a few additional reasons. It is called The Evolution of Bacterial Resistance in Humans. However, it's located in the chapter called A Tour of the Cell. So at this point of the course, students are at the beginning. They're just starting. They're learning about the cell. They haven't learned about evolution yet. So that's a little bit problematic that this section is largely discussing evolution, and it's a topic that they haven't learned about. There's a lot of brand new vocabulary words. It is also written as kind of one of those side inserts. I don't know, I can show you guys. So it's this, and it's not really the main body of the textbook. It's kind of like an insert connection. And generally these kinds of, these areas of the textbook are requiring students to apply the knowledge they've been learning to real world situations. So that adds another layer of onto the comprehension side of things. Okay, so I've chosen the reciprocal teaching strategy to focus on. And I chose this strategy because I think it can be super helpful when using a textbook. First, the teacher must model and practice the strategy with the students several times before they're ready to do it on their own. I'm using this strategy with the idea that I've already explained the strategy using another section of the book, and then I've also modeled the strategy with another section of the book. So at this point, when I'm going to explain, we're using the strategy collaboratively. And the next time we use it would be guided practice, moving towards independent use of the strategy. And finally, the full shift of independent use would be completed through the scaffolding approach that they mentioned in one of the articles, where the teacher models, the students participates, and then they reflect on the strategy. So the first step is prediction. I would tell the students we will be working together to understand the section that we're going to be reading. So I tell them to go to page 71 of their biology textbook. I tell them to scan the page, looking at the title, images and captions, and subheadings. So the subheading reads Human versus Bacteria Evolution Connection, and then the title is The Evolution of Bacterial Resistance in Humans. There are also two images. One is a picture of the bacteria here with a caption, and then here is a map of Bangladesh. So after they've kind of scanned over that, I have them like write down any predictions they have, and then ask them to share, after they've had a chance to do that, ask them to kind of share out loud. And I listen for specific language from the students, like are they using the subheadings to make the predictions? Are they applying their prior knowledge? How are they utilizing the images to support their predictions? Then we move on to questioning. So after making predictions, I'll tell the students to jot down a few questions they have before reading the text, and I can give them a couple examples, like, okay, my question is, I wonder how this section will relate to the plasma membrane, which is the topic we're learning about. And I let the students write down their questions, and then I tell them that they can reread the passage. I'm not sure what would be the best for this. I was thinking maybe they could read it out loud with their partner. But if that didn't work for that class, then they could read it silently at their table. And then, but I tell them that at the end of each paragraph, I would like them to write down a question they have about that paragraph. And there's four, let me count, there's 4 total paragraphs. So they need to have that when we come back to the discussion. They need to have 4 questions. So after they read through the text, I would ask them to share any questions that they wrote down while they're reading, and then also any like big picture final question they have. And I kind of listen to their questions and look for how detail oriented they are, how are they making inferences, or again using the images to connect to the text. Okay, so then the next step, I tell them that we'll work to clarify any confusing words or phrases from the text. And I offer a few that might have been puzzling, like what is the disease cholera? What is a gene? What does a mutation do? How do antibiotics work, etc. There's a lot of new things in this section. And if a student has a particular section that they need clarification on, I would reread that out loud to the class and then kind of offer an explanation. So one example was, although the mechanism is not yet understood, these genes appear to offer a survival advantage by making the proteins more resistant to attack by the cholera toxin. So I would, explain what it means to be resistant and also kind of guide them to reach their own clarification, like pointing to the previous sentences, kind of for clues to what the author might be saying in that one difficult sentence. And then I would also kind of give them general strategies for clarifying when they're reading independently. Telling them they can reread sections, they can slow down their reading, they can visualize what the text is saying, or they could try to connect the text to previous things that we've been learning. And then finally, it's the summarizing stage. And so I tell them to write down the main ideas from the text and then highlight any supporting details, like the most important things that they got out of this reading. And after they've written down their ideas, we would kind of as a class write the summary. And so kind of have like a brainstormed list maybe on the whiteboard, and I would just call on the students to have them jot down their idea or blurt out their ideas and write them down, and then kind of write the full paragraph using the students, so it's student driven sort of. And then so now the strategy is complete, but I would like to kind of as a wrap up get a summary or get some feedback with student voice. So I would ask them how confident they feel about the material in the reading. So how is their content feeling? And then I would also ask them how they're feeling with the strategy, because I could use that feedback to plan my next use of the strategy. Like, do I need to continue to collaboratively work, or can we move on to a little bit more guided independence? And then we would plan on using that strategy for the whole year and just get stronger with it, and then it's something that they can take on later when they go to college, or they can translate it into their other courses. So yeah, that's all I have for you, and I'll see you guys next week.